Hi, I'm Glyn Dewis and welcome to episode 17 of my video podcast. Okay, so this week we're going to kick things off with a retouch of a picture from start to finish. But this one we're going to do super fast. Now, it's not because we're going to rush through or anything like that. It's more because it's the kind of image that doesn't actually require much retouching. But the techniques we use are really, really fast. And I think maybe there's a couple of things in there that you might kind of like not know about, or maybe just nice to be reminded of. So this is the image we're going to work on, the one you can see on screen now. This was shot using my invisible black background technique, where we shot it outdoors around about afternoon time, early afternoon, quite bright outside, and we shot it with one flashlight and one reflective umbrella. And this was the out of camera shot you can see here. Now, when I was originally doing that, in fact, let's just reset it. So this was the original out of camera image. Now, when I was doing this, I wasn't shooting tethered and I didn't have like a Hoodman loop with me. So when I looked at the picture on the back of my camera, the background itself looked completely black. But now that I brought it into Lightroom, I can see that it wasn't quite black. In fact, when we look at a picture here in Lightroom, I'm in the develop module now, and the top right hand corner, you get this information here. You get the histogram and you get the details about what your picture is. It tells you your ISO, your zoom length, your F number and your shutter speed. But when you put your cursor over the top of your picture, that changes. Underneath the histogram now, if you look over in the right hand corner of my screen, you can see that it's got R, G and B, and loads of numbers keep moving as I move the cursor around. Now, if I wanted this background here to be completely black, I mean jet black, we'd have it R, G and B would all be 0. But we can see as I move my cursor around, whatever's underneath it, it gives me a readout over in the right hand side, and we can see there are all kinds of numbers coming up. So clearly my background isn't completely black. So here's my kind of thought process when it comes to how we're going to retouch this picture. What we're going to do, in fact, let's just get rid of that one there. We're going to have 2 copies of this picture. The first copy is going to concentrate only on the background, and the second copy will be the one where the face looks great. So the idea here is that we'll kind of send both of those images over into Photoshop, and one layer we can use for the background, and the other layer we can kind of use a layer mask just to bring through the face. So the 2 of them combine and we create one final image. But here's basically what I mean. We've got our out of camera image. I'm in the film strip at the bottom here, and I'm going to right click on the thumbnail where it says create virtual copy. So now I've got 2 copies of my picture. The first one, all I'm going to do is just get the black slider here over on the right hand side and increase the blacks, really darken them down. So now when I bring my cursor over into the picture, if you're looking in the top right where we've got the RGB readouts, they're all saying 0. So that's telling me my background is completely black. That is all I need to do with that copy of the picture. Now the second one is where I want to make his face look really, really good and detailed. So I'm not bothered about what shows up in the background. So when I look at his face, in fact, let's just get rid of the film view there so we can see this nice and big. I think the highlights are maybe just a little bit too much on his face. So I'm going to bring down the highlights, dragging over the slider here, just so I get the look that I want in his face. Something like that looks good. And when we've got an interesting face, that's what I'll say, an interesting face, clarity works brilliantly. So I'm going to bring up the clarity as well. And the difference this makes, it really does bring out, I don't know, a bit more life in the face as well. Kind of real character builder, the clarity slide on the right image. So I'll bring up the clarity. That looks good. You can see that the background's coming through now. That doesn't matter because we're going to deal with that when we actually go over into Photoshop. But I'll bring up the clarity. And I think the last thing I'll do is add a little bit of sharpening as well. Pictures like this, they can take quite a bit of sharpening. So I'll come down to the Detail tab. And I'll take the sharpening right up to around about 85 to 90, something like that. I only want the sharpening to be on him, so I can hold down my Alt key, click on the masking slider, the screen goes white, which means it's kind of like a layer mask, and we know that white reveals and black conceals. Well, at the moment it's all white, which means that a sharpening is being applied to the whole picture. But as I drag to the right hand side, black starts being introduced, less white, and that kind of allows me to really determine where I want the sharpening to be. The more I drag to the right, the more black is introduced, the less areas are sharpened. But I think around about here is fine because that's his face, his hair, and a bit on his clothing. So something like that. Now, so that's the 2 copies here. The first copy where the background's completely black. The second copy where all we're looking at is his face, the detail in the face. So now I'm going to send them into Photoshop, but I want to do that in a specific order because I want the background layer, the one that's got all the really, really dark area, the predominant part of the picture, I want that to be at the top of my layer stack. So I'm going to click on that one first. I'm then going to hold down my Shift key and click on the other image. So now they're both highlighted, but it has to be done in that order. So now when I go to the photo menu at the top of the screen and choose Edit in, Open as layers in Photoshop, the layer or the image that I clicked on first is the one that will appear at the top of the layer stack. And you'll see once we're in Photoshop why that's important. So we head over into Photoshop. It happens quite quickly. It brings both of these layers into the same document, which is really handy. And we can see when I turn these layers on and off, we go over to the right hand side here, the uppermost layer is the one that's got the dark background. And you'll see when I turn it off, you'll see that now we can see the detail in the background coming through. The bottom layer is the one where we've got all the detail in the face. So if all I want to do is just hide this portion of the top layer, which is the face where it's bright and just doesn't look good, I just add a layer mask, a white layer mask to it. White layer mask means I can still see everything that's there. But if I want to kind of punch through this upper layer to reveal what the face looks like on the layer below, all I need to do is make sure that my foreground color is black. So I press X to swap the 2 foreground and background colors around. I get a brush, making sure that I'm painting at 100% opacity from the options or the tools here at the top of the screen. And then I can increase or decrease the size of my brush with my left and right bracket keys, and I paint on his face. So now this is kind of like punching a hole through that top layer to reveal the face on the layer at the bottom. So we get the best of both worlds here. We're still keeping that dark background, but we're now starting to see that really, really interesting face with all the lines that have been brought in because we use clarity. So we'll go for something like that. Looks great. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is a black and white conversion. In fact, before we do that, let's just make sure I've not missed anywhere on him that we've painted. And I can do that, hold down my Alt or Option key and actually click on the layer mask itself over in the layers panel. If I click on that, it reveals what the mask looks like. And I can see in the bottom right hand corner here, I've missed a little bit. So with my black brush, I'll just fill that area in. And to go back to the view of my picture again, hold down the Alt or Option and click on the layer mask. So we can see exactly what it's like now, all kind of like making one complete image here at the moment. So now the thing that I'm going to do is do a black and white conversion. So I can see that my foreground and background colors are black and white. I'll come over to the adjustments here on the right hand side, the adjustment layers. I'll click on the gradient map, and that gives me a really nice black and white. But I can then, like I've showed in a video earlier on, I can click on the gradient that appears in the properties to bring up the gradient editor, and that's when I can start using these sliders to really control how I want that black image, that black and white image to look. So I'll increase the midtones here, so just that actually makes those brighter areas not quite so bright, so something like that. We can also change the contrast as well using the smoothness slider. Something like that, but that's looking good. Click OK. Just a couple of other little things I can do. I think I might actually try and use maybe just a little bit more clarity actually on his face and see what that does. So I'm going to click on the very bottom layer. That's the layer that's got the face that we worked on with all the clarity and sharpening. I'll then go to filter menu at the top of my screen, and I'm going to convert this to a smart filter because now that we've got the creative cloud, I can then use Camera Raw as a filter, and that is incredibly handy because there's so many things in there that I can make use of, such as clarity, maybe the orange as well. There's all kinds of things there in the hue, saturation and luminance channels. So I can now go, it's converted it to a smart filter. I can then go filter, Camera Raw filter, jump back over into Camera Raw, and I can just increase the clarity. What you're seeing here now is the color image because the layer that contained the face was right at the bottom of the layer stack. The black and white conversion was right at the top. So we're going back to almost like the original image almost, apart from where we've actually added in that clarity. So I'm going to add more clarity in now, really push the clarity on his face. Click OK, and you'll see how it changes the image when we come back in. So even more clarity has been added. And what I think I'll do now is just change the composition of this picture by getting my crop tool. So I'll press C on the keyboard and get my crop tool, so we get these crop handles around my image. A lot of people tend to think that the crop tool is only used for cropping the image down, but we can actually use it to increase the actual canvas area. So I'm going to click on the handle here in the middle on the left hand side and drag out of my image, and that actually increases the size of the canvas like so. So I actually get this grid up here, so I can actually use the rule of thirds. So we'll bring the top down, I might bring the bottom up just a little bit, and we'll click on the tick at the top of the screen. So now we've kind of changed the actual composition of the image here, moving our model more over to one side of the picture, but we need to fill in this transparent area. So what I shall do, let's just close down this smart filter here so we've just got nice simple layers to see. I need to add a layer beneath this image, and I can do that two ways. I can either click on the new layer icon in my layers panel, and that appears, and then drag it to the very, very bottom, which is a bit of a long-winded way of doing it. Or I can hold down my Command or Control key and then click on the new layer icon, and then it'll automatically put a layer at the bottom of my layer stack. I then want to just fill this area here in with the same black that we've got around our model. So I'll then press I on my keyboard to get the eyedropper, and I'll just click down just right on the boundaries of the image here. Click that, and I'll sample whatever colour it is that I press down on into my foreground colour. Then I'm going to go to Edit, choose Fill, and from the drop down menu here where it says Use, I'm going to choose Foreground Colour and click OK. So that kind of fills that in now. So very, very quickly we can change the composition, we can use layer masks to add some real interest into a picture, and it's just a quick way to show you how you can use virtual copies in Lightroom and send both of them into Photoshop to then start using layer masks in a very quick but creative way. Hi guys, I'm Glyn Dewis and I'm a photographer, retoucher and trainer from the UK, and I just want to take a few moments of your time to let you know about a brand new full-length downloadable tutorial I've just released called Supercar Retouching. Now in this tutorial, which is roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours long, I take you through the whole retouching steps from the out of camera picture all the way through to the finished retouch. Now we're going to go through everything. We're going to have a look behind the scenes so you can have a look at exactly where we were photographing, what equipment was used, what settings were used, and then taking that finished image over into Lightroom or Camera Raw to then start preparing it. We're going to look at bringing out details, how to shape the light, how to do some sharpening, and much, much more before then we go up a gear and head over into Photoshop. Because that's when we then realistically add in a new sky. I'll show you how to add realistic reflections on the side of the car and in the windows. Also how to deal with problem areas where we ended up with like a hot spot on the back of the car caused by the really bright sunlight on the day. We then move on to doing colour effects, and also I'll show you how to use plugins but non-destructively. And then we finish off with that cartoon kind of painterly look. Now included in this tutorial are the raw files, so you're also going to be able to carry on and do these steps yourself. You also get a full layered Photoshop file amongst other things within this download. There's a couple of bonus videos in there as well. You'll also be able to take all these retouching steps and use them on your own images, just like I have in this picture here of an Aston Martin V12. So guys, that's Supercar Retouching, available now on my website, glyndewis.com. Okay, so before we finish up, there's just a couple of extra things I want to do in this image, and I think looking at it, although we've got a nice black and white conversion here, it's quite moody, the fall off of light on his clothing here isn't enough for me. I think the clothing has too much light in it, so I want to kind of simulate it as if we had the light falling off the further down his body that it goes. So there's a couple of ways we can do that. The first way is just a standard gradient within Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all add a blank layer to the top of my layer stack. I'm going to make sure that my foreground colour is black, so we can see that in the toolbar here, it's set to black. And then I'm going to get the gradient tool in the toolbar. So we get the gradient tool, and at the top here we have all the options that come up whenever we choose a tool. In the far left we've got the gradient, and when I click on that it brings up the gradient editor, and I'm going to use the one that's in the top row, second along, and that's foreground to transparent. Now generally when you hover your cursor over anything within Photoshop you get the words popping up to tell you what it is. So you can see now that my cursor is over this one, it says foreground to transparent, and I'll click OK. So now all I've got to do is just click at the very, very bottom, just outside of the image, click and drag upwards. And you'll see that starts to add in a bit of black there, maybe a little bit more. So I'll do that again and drag a little bit higher, somewhere like that. I might want a little bit of fall off of light on his back area as well. So I'll click outside the image on the right hand side and drag into the image, like so, and we can see that it adds in that kind of vignetting or like the light fall off. If that's too much, because it's on its own layer, we can then use opacity to control how that light fall off looks. So I'll go to around about 85, 86, something like that, and we can see the effect that has by turning that layer on and off. It does make quite a dramatic effect there on the way that the light looks. It really does start to shape it and draw your attention towards his face. Just a very, very simple technique. Now another way we could do that is again going back into the camera raw filter, and I think if we do that there's one extra thing that I want to do. So to go into the camera raw filter now, what I want to do is to make sure that I'm working completely non-destructively, which is something I'm really championing these days. I'm going to make sure that all my layers here are selected. So the top layer selected, I'm going to hold down my shift key and click on the very, very bottom layer, and you can see they're all highlighted now, because I want to put all these into a smart object. Because if I wanted to do this any other way, I'd have to create one of those combined or merged or stamped layers, and I don't want to do that because that's working non-destructive. So I'm going to put all these layers into a smart object. They're all highlighted. At the top right hand corner of my layers panel we're going to fly out menu and choose convert to smart object. Takes a few seconds to do it, but basically what Photoshop does now is it gets all these layers, puts them into a virtual filing cabinet if you like, makes it nice and tidy, and puts them all into what appears to be one layer. But we still have access way, way, way down the line whenever we want to. At a future time we've still got access to all of these layers. So we'll just wait for Photoshop to put this into a smart object so that then we can go over into camera raw. So now that we've got our smart object, I can then go to the filter menu at the top of the screen, choose camera raw filter, and then once in there make use of the radial filter to again simulate that kind of light fall off. So what I shall do is I'll go to the bottom left hand side of my screen, click on the minus to zoom out just a little bit like so, choose the radial filter from the top of my screen, and then all I want to do is just affect the exposure. So I'll just bring the exposure down on this radial filter just a little bit. It doesn't matter exactly where this goes because we can change it real time on the fly once we've actually got the filter in place. So I'll bring it down just a fraction, click in the middle of my picture and drag out a really big gradient, or sorry, really big radial filter like so. Now the reason for this is I don't want the radial filter to affect his face or his hair. I only want it to affect the bottom right hand corner of the picture to simulate that light fall off. So once I've created this really big radial filter, I'm going to click in the center of it and then drag it upwards so that the only area is over the top of the picture is in the bottom right hand corner. So now when I choose to slide the exposure slider back and forth, you can see the only area affected now is in the bottom right on his clothing, nowhere near his face, so that's nice and safe. So I'll bring it down to around about there. That looks good. And we'll come out of the radial filter. I'll just click on the hand tool and we'll zoom back in again by clicking on the plus sign. And I think probably the last thing I'll do is, I still think there's the highlights on his face here. Maybe where it's just a little bit warm. They're just a little bit too hot for me. So I'll just use the highlight slider, bring that over to the left just a little bit like so to bring them down, and then just give the clarity one last boost just for good measure, like so, and then click OK. So that'll then take us back into Photoshop. So there you go, that's just a couple of ways to finish off to show you how you can simulate that light fall off and also reduce just a little bit of those hot areas using the highlight slider within Camera Raw. Okay, some quick news for you that I literally only found out about yesterday is that my very good friend, fashion and glamour photographer from the Netherlands, Frank Doorhoff, has some very exciting news in that his brand new book is very soon to be released. Now, if you go to my Google Plus page, I've actually got an image here showing the front cover here. It's called Mastering the Model Shoot. Now, from speaking with Frank, the book looks like it's just a few short weeks away from being available. So to celebrate it, he's actually running a 50% off any digital download from his web store. So if you go to frankdoorhoff.com and at the top here where you have the menu, choose the direct video downloads, you can take a look at all the instructional DVDs that Frank's created and made available. Now, Frank is an absolute master when it comes to lighting and all aspects of photography, and he's got some fantastic instructional DVDs that you can see on the screen here through his website. So definitely head on over to frankdoorhoff.com. When you choose any of these instructional DVDs, make sure you use the discount code of BOOK, B-O-O-K, and that'll give you this 50% discount. Now, Frank is obviously extremely excited about the book, as are all of us. We've been waiting for this for ages. So definitely take advantage of the excitement. Make sure you head on over to frankdoorhoff.com and make use of this 50% discount. It's only available until the end of play this Friday. Now, it's already Thursday, the 3rd of October. By the end of play, Friday the 4th of October, the 50% deal is gone. So definitely make sure you head over and take advantage of Frank's excitement. Okay, so thanks for checking out this episode. As always, if there's any questions and comments, tips, tricks or techniques that you'd like to see in future episodes, just drop me a line to glyn@glyndewis.com or leave a comment in the section below and I'll see what I can do. Make sure also that you click on the subscribe button, which is kind of like in this area here on the screen, somewhere around about here, so that you never miss out on any of the new videos that I'm posting. And please, it'd be great if you could share this channel with anybody else that you know that might like to benefit from the actual content. Now, that's about all for this week, but there's just 2 more days now. This is going out on Thursday, the 3rd of October, which means just 2 more days until this year's Scott Kelby Worldwide Photo Walk. Now, I'm leading the walk over in Oxford in the UK, starting at 1 o'clock prompt. So if you're joining me, I'll see you there. But if you're involved in a walk anywhere else across the world, have a great day and I'll see you next time.